Have you ever thought about people who die alone? Yeah. Me neither. I never really thought about it, and neither did the author, really, Richard Roper, who had this idea for a novel after he read an article about people whose job it is to take care of the effects of someone who has died alone, who has passed away without any family or really friends to take care of basically the business of death. Collecting paperwork, clearing the house, making the arrangements. This isn't something that I really think about, but it's a pretty fascinating and sad topic, especially with all the discussion that goes on in our modern cultures about this feeling of loneliness that so many of us experience, which is ironic in the world that has so much instant connection. So concept-wise, I was really pleased to have found this book, How Not to Die Alone, which I received as a gift during a Putnam Presents event in Washington, D.C., where I actually met the author, heard him pitch his book a little bit, and decided to give it a go. This book is getting a little buzz. It was a book of the month pick. Those books tend to do pretty well, and I'm seeing it around a bit, and I wanted to give you my review. This came out pretty recently on May 28th, and I was lucky enough to read it before it came out, so 10 points to me. Let me give you a quick basic description, and then we'll get into my brief pros and cons of this book. How Not to Die Alone is about a guy named Andrew who works for the health department, and his job, as I mentioned, is essentially taking care of the effects and making the arrangements for people who have died alone. Ironically, Andrew himself leads a pretty lonely life. He has an obsession with trains and Etta James records and really nothing else. He doesn't really have friends, he doesn't really have family, and he lives a lonely life. However, that is not what he tells his coworkers. He ends up sort of getting himself in a weird lie. It starts small, but then it just grows and grows and grows, and he can't get himself out of it. That lie is that he has an entire family, that he has a wife and 2 kids, and everything's perfect, and they live in a beautiful townhome together, and he's created this entire story of their lives, which is incredibly inaccurate. Now, lies like this can only go on so long, right? And one day, this woman named Peggy is new to the office. She's a new coworker, and just talking to her, Andrew realizes that maybe there's hope for a different sort of life for him, maybe more like the life he's imagined, but isn't anywhere near achieving. So Andrew's gonna have to make a decision, confess to these lies he's been telling, or continue on his path. And that is the basis for How Not to Die Alone. Here's some things I really liked about this book. It has typical, perfect British humor. It's a little bit cynical, a little bit dry, and if you're into that, then it's definitely going to make you chuckle at times. I also really liked the concept and the inspiration behind this story. I think the idea itself is a really interesting one, and one that makes you ponder a different sort of life than probably mine or yours. Also, this is Richard's debut. He is an editor turned author, and I think that his work has a lot of potential. He's definitely got a lot of the structural stuff down, he's got a lot of the sentence structure stuff down, and all of that was pretty good. I want to say overall, before I get into the cons, that this overall for me was about a 3 out of 5 star read. Let's talk a little bit about what I didn't think was so great about this. Character dynamics first, if you don't mind, because maybe that's just easier. The biggest, or not the biggest, but certainly really important in these sort of novels where we're essentially starting with someone that's going on an like emotional personality transformation, right? I think it's important in those sort of books that you feel in some sense connected to the character, or even not connected, but that you feel like you're rooting for them, like you're on their team, like you're championing them, and you want them to go on this journey, and that way you as the reader celebrate all of the landmarks as it happens, right? So unfortunately, I was never really rooting for Andrew, and I wish that there had been a little more setup in the beginning, something that made me spark for Andrew and just get behind his character and champion his changes. That didn't really happen. I think part of that was because of how Andrew's backstory was split up through the entire novel. So I think maybe it would have been stronger if we had gotten more of Andrew's backstory in the beginning. Instead, Andrew's backstory is kind of the secret that the author wanted you to figure out, that wanted you to keep reading for. It wasn't strong enough. The hints of whatever had happened in Andrew's past, it wasn't strong enough to make you want to find out more. And I think if we had switched that around, rearranged it a bit, put that more near the beginning, or at least most of it near the beginning, then everything else would have made sense, and we would have been able to see Andrew as a character as a person who is more than he is now. Because these transformational characters, right? People who are down in the dumps or having a rough time, it's very unlikely that they've always been that way, right? So you kind of have to relate to the reader at some point where, hey, this person wasn't always bad. This person has potential. This person can be great again. So I think it's important to outline that in the beginning of these transformational novels, especially particularly of this type with the whole loneliness epidemic. That contrast would have been really nice to have in the beginning, and it would have made me enjoy the journey more. Andrew's secret or his backstory was not really all that penetrating. It wasn't all that like emotional or moving by the time it was revealed, and it took so long to be revealed that by the time it happened I was just like, okay, and I didn't really feel either which way about it. So it was kind of an opportunity missed. The third bit of the character relationships was that I was not really convinced of this budding romance between Andrew and Peggy. I just wasn't rooting for that either, and I wasn't convinced of his feelings or her feelings or any of the other dynamics that happen. I don't want to give you spoilers, but I mean, that's pretty obvious from the description, right? I just wasn't ever convinced of that. I never thought it was a good idea. I was never rooting for it. And I think that's basically my issue with this novel, and that's why it knocked it down to 3 stars. It's just because I wanted to be more invested. Lastly, I want to talk about the overall structure of the novel. I do think that because Richard Roper is an editor, obviously he has a lot of the details down. However, I think something's missing in the overall structure. I mentioned how I feel like some parts might have been better at the beginning instead of shuffled throughout, and another thing that was kind of strange was that it felt a bit jumpy. While he is an efficient writer, and I really like that, I like writers to be just like, you know, I'm a Chekhov's gun sort of person. So I like that about it, but I think there's certain moments where you should slow down, and particular in this book where there were emotional moments, or I don't know, more tense moments, just something tumultuous happening where you want to feel it. It's like we skip over it and we go on to the next thing, and I think that happens too quick. I think it would have been better to be efficient, yes, but when something serious happens, let the reader experience that, let them dive into it, let them simmer in it for even a paragraph or 2 more before you just jump off into the next section. Sometimes it felt like bits were missing, like bits and pieces, and the whole novel felt like it was written in short jumps or short sections, and then another short section, another short section, and it was never like taped together. We never taped together those sections, if that makes sense. It could use just a little bit of polishing. I'll keep in mind it did have an arc and I got it months ahead, so I don't know how the final version has changed, if that was polished up or not. I do know that most arcs, other than spelling changes and a few differences, are pretty much what the book is, so I don't know, maybe the finished book's different, but frankly I kind of doubt it. So that's pretty much it. Those are my thoughts. It's about a 3-star book, middle of the road. Parts of it I liked, parts of it I thought could have been better, but I am curious to see what Richard Roper does next as an author, and we shall see. If you like these sort of more contemporary, kind of funny, transformational novels, it still might be a good pick for you. I just say borrow it instead of buy it and see how you like it. That's it for this review video of Richard Roper's How Not to Die Alone. If you liked it, do me a quick favor before you hit off on the next video. Just give it a quick thumbs up, drop me a comment below, and if you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet but you do like all things bookish, book reviews, TBRs, hauls, unhauls, wrap-ups, all the good reading stuff, then I'm your girl. So go ahead and press that subscribe button and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye guys.